Self-regulation is something that resilient kids do. Resiliency leads to a self-awareness and a self-regulation. Fragile children who are overparented and overprotected don't need to self-regulate because mom will do it for them.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, I want to look a little bit at TikTok, partly because TikTok announced that they are going to interrupt teens' news feeds with guided meditation after 10 p.m. The platform's been testing this feature with a wind down prompt, but now it'll show a notification with guided meditation by default to all users under the age of 18. TikTok's wind down prompt initially only played calming music to remind teens to take a break from the app at nighttime. It was only shown to teens that were under 16, but now the prompts will include meditation too, and will be available to adults who toggle on sleep hours from their screen time settings in their phone as well. You know, Dr. Kathy, we use technology prompts a lot in our lives. Everything from the microwave to, announce this timer to go off when this thing that I'm trying to do is done. But there's also prompts that we use maybe within our social media or even our Alexa, like things that we would have in our homes to remind us to do different things that we need to do in our lives. But I wonder if it's doing something to us. What does it do when we expect technology to now do things like even like prompt us to wind down at night, to maybe do some self-regulation or motivation? What do you think this kind of does, and how do you think it impacts our kids?
It adds to the reality that we can continue to be lazy, that we don't have to think. It really concerns me. Now, part of me is happy with it because I don't want them on TikTok. Like, I would prefer nobody's ever on TikTok. But it's so there is a part of me that is happy that the children and the teens may be warned that, "Hey, you've been on here a lot, it's 10 PM in your time zone. You might wanna think about winding down." Part of me is happy TikTok is taking some responsibility. The other part of me, and don't ask which part, is disappointed that, like, where's the parent? Like, where's the parent saying, "Hey, it's curfew for your phone. Remember, it's 10 PM. Give me your phone so I can charge it tonight." So again, it's taking parents off the hook. It's really saying to kids, "You don't have to decide. It will decide for you." And you actually said, I think you used the phrase self-regulate. One of the more important self skills that children need, that we also need, is to self-regulate. Where I know I have been on this too long. I know I'm hungry. I should go eat. I know I'm tired. I should sleep. I know I've ignored my grandmother. I should call her. I know, and therefore I will do this. That's self-regulation. I know I've studied enough versus a kid who shuts the book and doesn't even think about whether or not I've studied enough. I studied, but I won't do well on the test tomorrow versus, well, yeah, it's just, anyway, self-regulation. And self-regulation is something that resilient kids do. Resiliency leads to a self-awareness and a self-regulation. Fragile children who are overparented and overprotected don't need to self-regulate because mom will do it for them. Mom or dad will knock on the door and say, "Hey, you've been on your tech too long." The other thing that fragile children cannot do is self-advocate. Self-advocate is so important, where this is the ability for a child to ask for help. "Hey, dad, could you help me study? I'd love to bounce this off, verbally with somebody. Would you interact with me?" Like, that's a beautiful skill to self-advocate. This is the kid who goes up to the teacher and says, "Man, I got so confused by this paragraph. So I want you to know I read it and I was working on my homework and I'm so sorry, but question number 3, I just couldn't get it." Like, that is so beautiful of a child to be vulnerable and authentic in the moment with an authority figure to say, "I don't get it." That's to self-advocate. And if tech does things for us, then we don't learn to do either one of those things. And now we're dependent upon the tool. It causes us to be passive, takes the parent off the hook. It concerns me.
You know, Dr. Kathy, I think that's incredibly insightful. If I could just kind of give you a pat on the back, maybe, on this, because I've
Thank
seen
you.
it with teens and people that we've mentored inside of my wife's and I's ministry, and even with our own kids. There is this reality when you sit down with a student and you start talking about life and things of that nature, they will oftentimes say, "Oh, yeah, I know that I'm on my device too much. And I know I'm on my device too much." And the only way to get them off their device is that the device helps them get off their device, right? Like there's that crutch that's kind of put there that they would say, "I set a timer now so that I can get off my device." Not that I'm self-regulating myself. I have the muscles to say, this has been 5 minutes too long and I need to not do this anymore. And you self regulate. And then, like you said, to self advocate is another muscle that is probably linked into it, right? That really is important for them to build. So I think that gets to the point of why I was frustrated about this without knowing why I was frustrated about this. Because I think it ends up being an authority issue a little bit, where we now look to companies to step in to be the role of parents. It's this idea of that sphere of the company or the technology has grown to now kind of absorb that role of the parent too. And in some ways, it's designed to help the parents, but actually the parents are leaning more heavily on the technology to do that, right? What do you think that kind of does even to the parent child relationship when we look to technology to be the one to tell us when it's been too much or not, or they've been on their screens enough?
Yeah, it may cause the child to think the parent's irrelevant. You know, Wayne, that in the book that I wrote, Screens and Teens, I talk about the fourth lie that young people especially believe because of their tech use is that I am my own authority. I can ask Siri, I can ask Alexis, I can ask Google. I don't need a parent. Like when I was a kid, Wayne, I had to leave my bedroom and go find my mom and dad to ask a question. And so they were my authority and they were the wisdom in the room, if you will. And now kids can feel like they don't need parents and parents can check out. I think it is easier for now. I better back up here and say like, we respect today's parents have a lot going on. Like, I respect genuine busyness of parents. There are parents, single or married, who are devoted to their children, and some who have expectations from work that are challenging, and they have hobbies, and they're serving on a committee at church, and they're sandwiched between their children and their aging parents. Like, it's hard today for a lot of people. There's an economic situation maybe that they're working extra hours, and so I wanna say that we get that here, and yet our concern would be that parents can check out and parents can decide they don't need to knock on the kid's door. I wonder if parents fall into their devices because that relieves their stress. They're either binge watching or binge listening or binge gaming or binge social feed. They're on their social feed so much because they're stressed and they need a rest from what they do and they think that will give them the rest that they say they need. But again, you're the parent, and I want you to be the parent. I want you to be the one that guides the kid, and I want you to train them to guide themselves as well. So you stop in at, 10 PM one night, 9:55 the next night, 9:50 the next night, 9:45 the next night. You develop some type of a strategic way of training them to feel like they've been on the device too much, where the TikTok feed won't do that. They'll maybe come on every night at 10 with their meditation and their music. So let's get the parents involved, if that makes sense.
Dr. Kathy, to close out, I want to maybe have you. I think I always hate this idea that we kind of beg the question. We never really answer the question that maybe is the most motivating. And I'd like to have you kind of pinpoint this. Why should parents, be the ones to engage this and not turn to tech? And maybe even how should they do that as they go forward?
Wow, that's good, Wayne. Do you wanna answer it? Um, and I'd love your reaction to your own question if you want to share it. I want parents to be the authority. I want parents to do their job. I want parents to show their children, "I know you. I love you too much to allow this to continue. We value your time. You have expectations for your tomorrows, which means that algebra is no joke, and we know you have a test in 2 days. How are you doing with that? You act grumpy and sleepy every morning." Like, I want the parent to be alert, and I want the parent to love well, which means their boundaries are set. You have boundaries when they're born. You have boundaries when they're 3. You don't let them eat every Oreo cookie, even though they like Oreos more than their broccoli. You have a boundary, and you say no, and you say yes. Prayerfully, that's what's happening when they're young. And, ideally, we continue that rhythm where the kids know that what we say matters, that we are on their side, that we have their best interests at heart. Let's prove that so that when they're in a world of hurt and there's some depression, anxiety, bullying, and stress, they say, "Hey, dad, how do you think I should handle this?" That's what I would love.
Yeah, and Dr. Kathy, you challenged me to answer my own question, which I don't really like that you do sometimes, but I think that the thing that I would pick up from this too is that it's a big part of our identity formation for our kids, right?
Mhm.
You talk about this in Five to Thrive, that idea of we're going to build their security and then their identity, and then they come to this place of belonging. And it's natural for moms and dads to kind of say, well, we're gonna, there's technology in their life, and it's how they talk to their friends, and it's how they quote unquote ride the proverbial bicycle over to their friend's house to see if they want to hang out, and they're actually hanging out online, and they do kind of all these things. And then as parents, we kind of expect them to navigate that world and they're okay with it. But we would never do that kind of, I would say, maybe in the physical or tangible world. We'd never let them just, go down to their friend's house that we might never know, or we would never see their house even. We'd never know what their house looks like. We would want to know a little bit of and have some familiarity with that, partly because it's not just that idea of that my kids are safe, but my kids have an attachment or a connection between that house and also to me. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of naturally taking that next step. And I think that if we don't take that step with them in technology, to be the ones to say, hey, this thing is a tool. It's not a place for you to belong. You belong, to us, and we're building relationship. If a mom or a dad doesn't, step in and highlight that connection and is really the heavy there, I think it can be really disorienting for their child as they grow up and develop, that they almost like get that imprint. I just think of like a duckling that comes out of the shell and the first thing that it sees is like an automobile, and now it thinks it's an automobile. I have to follow the automobile, I have to act like the automobile. The same thing can happen within technology, that there's some imprinting of their belonging that gets imprinted to the technology, and now they look at themselves like technology and they act like technology and they see themselves through the lens of technology, and they just kind of lose their whole identity, and now they become thinking things or doing beings rather than human beings that God's made in their image, that they're designed to have a unique identity that's found fully and foremost in Christ. And they can attach their identity then to the technology. So I think that there's a huge significance for parents that they would take this step and really walk through that stage of belonging with their kids and not let technology say, this is how long you should belong to me. Parents should be the ones to say that.
Wow, I love what you were just communicating, and I'm compelled to say the parent doesn't have to have it all figured out first, right?
Right.
Like you just said, walk with, right?
Right.
Like the parent doesn't have to have all the answers, and they can say to a kid, "Man, I'm learning with you. This is such a new way that I have to parent." So let's encourage parents to do the very next best thing that they know to do, and I'm proud of them for listening to the podcast and maybe hanging out with others who are also learning, so they gain confidence.
As Dr. Kathy was talking today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Genesis chapter 39, and I'll begin reading at verse 6. Now, Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in his house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except for you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Joseph was raised in a patriarchal culture in Canaan. He learned critical lessons in integrity and responsibility, really from his father Jacob. In the ancient Near East, family lineage and honor shaped a lot of identity and ethics. Joseph's early character formation, though imperfect due to family dynamics, still equipped him with resilience, and later, as a servant in Egypt, he displayed extraordinary integrity and self-control, particularly when resisting Potiphar's wife's temptation. It was a decision that was rooted not in momentary willpower, but deep-seated character and habitual virtue. Joseph's story reminds us that self-regulation and integrity come from early experiences of accountability and clear moral guidance within a family life. Rather than relying on short-term fixes or external technologies as guardrails, it's important for us as parents to build our child's moral muscles through ongoing conversations about integrity and truthfulness and accountability. We should teach our kids to habitually ask, what honors God and respects others, rather than what can I get away with? And I think helping them discern that truth can be a bright light that shines and cuts through some of the dark moments that they're going to experience inevitably in their life. I want to thank you for listening to this Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily episode, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. So glad you joined us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.